Yeah, I know it's a Sunday morning, and all of us would probably have had a couple of other things we could have been doing this morning. So I'm delighted that you've chosen to be here. Any idea needs support, and you should know this, that just being here is your way of showing support for a great idea. So let's start by giving a round of applause to all those of you sitting over here. I mean, we deserve it for ourselves. So I think, well done. I'm gonna try and speak really in three roles that I see for myself today. The first is as a reader, as a lover of books. The second is as a fan of some of the people who we will be privileged to have a chance to listen to today. And the third is really as a bit of an author, as someone who's tried to write and found a little bit of fun in doing it. So really, I want to try and look at this entire day through those three lenses, as it were. But clearly, everybody here is a fan of books. I'm guessing you've enjoyed reading. And I must confess, as a little kid growing up, I read very little fiction. Okay? And people are sometimes surprised when they hear this. As someone who now thinks he can do a little bit with words, I was very poor with fiction. I just didn't enjoy it. And therefore, I'd fake it. I would read one Enid Blyton or one Famous Five and then try and pretend like I knew what was going on over there. And I just couldn't get myself to read too much of it. And unlike Arunaji, I didn't have the privilege of Time and Newsweek, but for me it was Illustrated Weekly, and Sunday Magazine. And I used to love reading what an India Today had or Sunday had. And suddenly I discovered that I love to read, not fiction, but really around the real world. And if you ask me who were my favorite authors at that time, there used to be a man called Dilip Bob, who used to write in India Today. And I thought, what a writer he was. And you should really read some of the stuff that he would write at that time. And I went to Mumbai. And if you lived in Bombay in those days, a busy bee, Behram contractor, would be like what a writer. And you'd say, wow, he could make your mouth water when he would talk about the Nalli Nihari that you could get in Muhammad Ali Road and how it was made. And you must remember that if he could make my mouth water, he must have been a great author because I was a vegetarian, yeah. But I still thought, wow, what a man. And his ability to then talk about his friend on the 21st floor and his musings on a weekend. And I said, this is incredible. Around this time, I also learned that people read really for one of two reasons. They read for pleasure or they read for profit. Okay? And I must confess, this stayed with me for a little bit because I think when you read fiction, it takes you into another world. It takes you into a world of make-believe, and you read for pleasure, for the pleasure of discovering that world. And very often, when you read nonfiction, you read for profit. When you read nonfiction, you're trying to say, hang on, what can I learn from here? What can I get from this book? It might sound too commercial, it might sound transactional, but the truth is that nonfiction has this ability to teach all of us something. Every book you read will give you a little bit of something that the author might have learned. And I like this line. Somebody said that every book you read becomes like a sheet of paper under your feet. Okay? And as you keep reading more books, those sheets tend to add up and make you just a little bit taller. And if you remember that the good things in life are always on those shelves higher up, it's a good idea to read a little bit. And as you read a little bit, you'll start to learn a lot more. There's someone called Alex who has a Twitter handle on, Alex and Books, I think is what he calls himself. But it's a great Twitter handle to follow because he'll constantly tell you about books and book summaries. And he does all these surveys on, favorite books. And everybody comes in and gives you some great gyan. But he says that if you want someone to read a book, tell them about the 10-10-10 formula. Okay? And what he says is the 10-10-10 formula is that every book allows you to get the experience of 10 years that the author might have had on a subject. And it allows you to get those 10 years in just 10 hours of reading and for less than $10. Okay? Where else can you get such a good deal? Where you can get all the experience and wisdom of an author condensed for you into a few hours and all for a small sum of money. Okay? So I think it's a good way to think about it. And I think even for those of us, as you go out and meet your friends, maybe a good idea to tell them that, you know what, it was a Sunday and I was at, India's Business Literature Festival, and this is what I think I got out of the day. And I think you'll get a hell of a lot, which is what brings me to the second part of my bit. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of a lot of the people sitting over here. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to listen in to some of these people. And I just got to try and make a random list of the names that we have over here today. And I don't know where to get started. But, maybe the first session today is going to be with Sanjeev, Mr. Sanjeev Chopra. It's interesting. Sanjeev is a retired IAS officer, distinguished gentleman. And I was telling him when I met him this morning that just as I read about him and the book he's written, I was fascinated. Okay? And I was fascinated because it's the kind of book I would never have gone on to a website and Google to see, can I get a book about this? But he's written about how India's states got formed. Okay? What a fascinating idea. When 1947, when we became a nation, we were, 9, 10 states, and some 500, 600 of these princely states, as it were. Every man thought he was king of his little territory. How did these states come into being? If you drive from here to Goa, why does it happen that at Nipani, there is this border that you need to clear and say that I'm now crossing into another state? Now, we didn't even know about it until COVID happened. And suddenly they decided, that, and as I discovered, that in Maharashtra and Goa, you didn't need a COVID certificate. But because you went through 5 kilometers of Karnataka, they wouldn't let you cross the border until you had a COVID certificate. Okay? How do these borders happen? How do these things happen? And I think, again, it brings me back to the fundamental idea of curiosity. We all need to ask ourselves these questions. And sometimes, if you ask a question, you'll find that a book has an answer. And I'm sure, Sanjeev, we're so looking forward to listening to you today as you tell us a little bit more about your book. But if Sanjeev is IAS, if you lived in Delhi, IAS was this big thing. Okay? But if you lived in Bombay, like I did, if you grew up in Bombay, then it was all about business and commerce. And IAS was, TAS was the big thing, TAS. Okay? You had to be part of the Tata Administrative Service. And I went to business school, and day one, job number one, even at that time, used to be Tata Administrative Services. And we've got, Bharat Waklu here today, who was a former TAS guy, and he's going to talk to us about how did Tatas discover this entire Tata leadership experiment? What really happens? What is it about these TAS people that they become special and they end up running businesses and doing so much cool work, right? Now, you'd have to be privileged to have a chance to, to either go to Dehradun and meet Sanjeev or to actually have a chance to listen to Bharat. But hey, an event like this one gives us a chance to listen to them. Now, I did tell you that reading is all about profit or pleasure, and it's all about profit. And we've got who better than, Anil Lamba, who can tell us all a thing or two about making money. Okay? Actually, he tells us only a little bit, because clearly none of us will make as much money as he does. But, there has to be a difference between being an author and being a reader. But Anil, it's so, I've kind of known Anil for a bit now, and it's always a pleasure listening to him. And I'm thinking we should have called his session something like an affair with Anil, because all his books are like romancing, flirting. Someday he's going to write a book about relationships and marriage, and it'll be called Investing. That's the way I think he might actually go. I know you'll have lots of other people over here who'll come in and speak through the day, but I must mention one other person. Okay, this is a young kid sitting over here who all of you will think, "Acha, ye bhi sunne aaya hai." Harsh. Okay, Harsh Pamnani, put your hand up, Harsh. I think let's have a round of applause for one of our younger authors today. Okay, Harsh was a little kid who I have, again, Harsh walked into my home one day, wrote to me somewhere along the way and said, "Come, wanted to meet me," and all of that, and has now written some amazing books. Okay, and if you want to understand how books are, I think it's appropriate, how books are actually moving into more digital platforms, right? And there was a time 20 years ago, perhaps, when if you were an author, people wanted to hear you and say, "Wow, ye to author hai," right? Today, you must meet all these young 17-year-olds, YouTube star hai, influencer hai, right? And I think Harsh's new book has covered many of these booming digital stars, as it were, and tried to decode the secret. And I dare say, Harsh, that you've got a lesson for all of us older people here, yeah? Because apart from writing a book, and I know some of us have got this right, and, how do we actually become multimedia people? How do we become multi-platform creators? Rather than saying, I will write a book and let the book do its work, how do we become people who can actually do a lot more than just that? I'm not going to name everybody over here today, but I think that's Manoj, right? Manoj is also here. And I didn't know too much about Manoj, but this is the good thing about what happens today. You should know you're lucky to be here and listen to Manoj, because I just saw that Raju Hirani is the man who's launched his book and said, wow, what a good book, and how, if you want to learn about networking, here's the man who can teach you what networking is all about, okay? So, like I said, there's profit to be had by the end of the day. And that brings me to the third part of what I think this day is all about, which is about writing. I must tell you this, and I'm hoping that there are people here who, there are some authors, but there are people who haven't written a book. I firmly believe there is a book inside each of us, waiting to be written, okay? And I think a day like this could just be that turning point. It could be that trigger for you to write that book. It might just inspire you. And I think it can inspire you in many ways. One would be to look at someone and say, wow, what a great book this person's written. Someday I'll write a book too. It could also inspire you by saying, Acha, isne bhi kitab likh diya tha. Surely I can write one too. Okay? But either way, I think it's a great idea for you to try and write that book. I will tell you this, at this age of my life, I'm a grandfather now, so I can talk about it. I can tell you this, as I look back on my life, one of the high points of my life was the day when my first book was launched. Okay? It was a high point. Nothing compares with it. And even today, if someone was to ask me to pick up that one day, one memory, one achievement, which kind of stands out, it still has got to be that day when that book was launched. I had a former boss, a man called R. Gopalakrishnan, another Tata man, another Unilever man, my boss early in my life, who launched that book. Sitting in the audience were my mother, my English teacher from school, lots of friends. It just is magical, okay? And therefore, I know there are people sitting over here who should write a book. I've been telling Anurag, who curates this festival, who's the man who's kind of built Businessworld and done a lot of this, good friend. Hey, Anurag, you must write that book. We've got Matangi sitting over here, another lady who's had so much experience in HR and people, in building out the people function in organization. Matangi, you must write a book. Because I think in many ways, a book is not just about what you've done, it's your way of giving back. It's your way of sharing some of the stuff that you might have learned, some of the stuff that you might have seen. And you know what? We all have this little dream that someday one little kid will climb up the attic and pull out and dust a book and say, you know what? My grandma wrote it or my grandfather wrote it. That is truly priceless. So I'm hoping that maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, we'll have this book and we'll have an author come and speak over here and he will say, you know what? I owe this book to a session that I attended of the IBLF in Pune someday. That will be the day. Enjoy the day, and I, like all of you, I'm looking forward to listening in to some fabulous sessions. All I'll say is this. There's nothing like a small audience which gives you a chance to listen in, ask questions, so make the most of it. And you know what? Now that you're here, don't be in a hurry to go away. The best part of the day is going to be at the end of the day. You've got Joe Foster, who's going to launch his book, Shoemaker. So I must add this. I did talk about being a fan of people. I'm a fan of a lot of authors here. Two other people I must talk about. One, of course, is Mr. Foster, who's going to be here. Who's come all the way from Manchester or from somewhere in the UK to launch his book. The other star that I thought I must mention to all of you, and he's not in the room right now, but that's how it works. His name is Rohit. Okay, Rohit runs a business called. Rohit is at the back over here. And Rohit, put your hand up. Everybody, put your hands together. I'll tell you why you should put your hands together for Rohit. Rohit runs a book shop and a book selling service called Express Books. He's every author's friend. Okay? And sometimes we all forget that we exist because there are other people who help us to be who we are. And as authors, we all need someone who will sell your books. And Rohit does a great job of not only selling books in the city, he will ship books to anybody in the country. He will come, deliver, get you to sign. He has a huge corporate connect. And therefore, for all of us here who are authors who don't know him, hey, make him your best friend. He'll sell a lot of books for you. But more than that, I think he'll do the kind of things that tell you that whatever you do as an author is worthwhile because there's someone who cares and who can make a difference. So Rohit, thank you for everything that you do for us. Back to you then, and like I said, enjoy the day. Thank you very much.